Planes of the internet. Before we go ahead and get started, let's make sure that this is working and alive and well, because I swapped a few things around on the internet earlier today, and it looks like the connection has been made. Eureka! Looks like we're on, which is fantastic news. You'd think I'd figured this out by this time, but not really. But it's working, so let's get going. Hello, my friends, and welcome back to yet another episode of Watching the Watchers Live. My name is Robert Gruler. I am a criminal defense attorney here at the R&R Law Group. We're located in Scottsdale, Arizona, and today we're talking about Ghislaine Maxwell. She's in trial, day 7. Very interesting testimony came out. We've got a lot to get to today. It's Tuesday, so we've got a solid 90 minutes to spend on this, and we're going to dig into it. We're going to start off with Ghislaine Maxwell's brother, named Max. He was out yesterday after trial wrapped up, and he's sort of begging the media, or pleading to the media, begging Merrick Garland, the Attorney General of the United States, to step in and help Ghislaine Maxwell, saying she's facing some pretty subhuman conditions and that this is something that should not be tolerated in a modern society. And so we're going to listen to him. He goes on for about 3 minutes. We're going to break that down into 2 clips and see what he's saying, because this is kind of the first time that we've heard from Maxwell's family. And Isabella standing right next to him. They're on the side of the road. It's nighttime. It's dark in New York City right after trial on day 6. And so we're going to catch up on that. We also have to catch up on some of those Palm Beach exhibits that we heard about yesterday in day 6. In day 6, we heard a lot of testimony from a number of different government witnesses, all telling us about the Palm Beach mansion that was down in Florida that was raided back in, I think this was back in, it doesn't matter when it was. Back in the 1990s, actually, is when this was. We saw those photographs yesterday. We were looking at the green pastel walls and all the interesting 90s LCDs and TVs and surround sound systems and all of those. But in the testimony, there was conversation about artwork on the walls and different pictures showing very interesting things. A lot of it we didn't get to hear much detail about, but those pictures, those exhibits have now been made available. So we can look at them, of course, not beyond the redaction. So we're going to see some of these images, but we can't see what's been redacted. But you can still understand what's happening here. Walls of redactions. So you can get a sense of what this room is for. So we've got a lot of pictures to get to. Then we're going to pick up with testimony that started today in day 7. We've got FBI Special Agent, woman by the name of Kimberly Meder, M-E-D-E-R, and she's talking about a different raid she was a part of in New York. And so we're going to sort of pivot from Florida up to New York. And we know that in the Epstein Maxwell case, in this entire saga, the Palm Beach residence was sort of the hub, and the rest of these locations in Little St. James, in New York City, and over in New Mexico, those were kind of the wheel. We had a hub and wheel and spoke model. And so this was the hub, but we spent our time in there earlier this week and last week. And so we're going to pivot over to New York and see what's going on with this townhouse. We have a lot more pictures there as well, because we're going to hear from an FBI forensic analyst, somebody named Stephen Flatley, who's also going to tell us about a hard drive that they found. And then the big testimony of the day is the second victim in the Ghislaine Maxwell case, woman going by the name of Carolyn, C-A-R-O-L-Y-N. She's only using her first name, so it's a pseudonym. I'm sorry, it's actually her real name, is my understanding, but she's not using her last name. So sort of a kind of half public testimony. And so we're going to hear from her today. A lot of testimony, basically the whole afternoon and a good portion of the morning was Carolyn. And so we're going to check in with the usual reporters on this. We've got inner city. We've got we'll get to all of them here in a minute. You'll see. Then we've got defense lawyer Jeffrey Paliuka, who's doing the cross-examination of Carolyn. And so we've got just a ton to get into. If you want to be a part of the show, the place to do that is over at watchingthewatchers.locals.com. We've got a form over there. It looks just like this. Throw your name and your question. If you're a member, you get access to the form. We'll take your questions. We're also sharing clips of the show, so we're clipping these up. Jane has a clip. We've got Caroline's going to have a clip. We've got Juan Alessi has a clip, and so on and so forth. And so if you want to be a part, if you want to share clips, then this is the place to do it. Go to the Robert Grueller Clips channel and share those away. All right. So it is day 7 of the Ghislaine Maxwell trial. And as we usually do, let's check in and see who is coming into court. As usual, the family's here. We've got Isabel Maxwell. We've got Kevin Maxwell, brother and sister of Ghislaine. They arrive at court for day 7. This is a photograph over from Reuters. And so, as I mentioned at the opening, let's take a listen here to see what Max has to say about this entire ordeal. His sister has been in custody, federal custody, for a long period of time. And, apparently, probably one of his compadres, Jeffrey Epstein, was also in federal custody. Didn't turn out too well for him in there. And so he's highly interested to make sure that nothing happens to his sister. He's caring about her well-being. And so yesterday, after day 6, after we had a full day of court, we covered a lot of that in detail yesterday. They were out in front of the courthouse steps, and this is what they said. We've got one clip. First, we're going to break this up into 2 clips. One here from Max and Isabel talking about the conditions inside the prison.
This is about the conditions at trial of our sister Ghislaine. There are 3 things that we have asked the Attorney General Merrick Garland to intervene today.
Merrick Garland, U.S. Attorney General.
Very, very simple things that we really shouldn't have to ask for. The first is that he stops the abuse of the 4-point restraints. These are shackles that bind her wrists to her waist and her feet to her waist. And she is shackled from the moment that she leaves the Metropolitan Detention Center until she arrives in the pending cell here in the courthouse, and the reverse when she goes back to the detention center in the evening. She's obliged to walk up and down stairs in the shackles, and they hurt her.
They hurt.
She's been bruised, she's even bled. And you really have to ask yourself, in 2021, what on earth are they doing shackling a 59-year-old woman in this way every day when she represents absolutely no threat to the community? That was agreed by the judge and by the prosecution and the various bail agents. The second thing that we've asked for is that she receive food. It's a pretty basic thing that we all need every day. She's on trial for her life, and she received no food on the first day. She received a boiled egg. She is lucky if it is not moldy. She receives a couple of pieces of bread, maybe a Kraft slice, and a banana or an apple. And that is literally everything from 6:30 in the morning to 7:30 at night when she gets back to the detention center.
All right, so you can see what he's discussing there. First of all, she's in these 4-point shackles, so she's got this waistband that's going around her waist, and it is very tight, and it's tying, basically it's acting as the center of gravity on her body, and it's shackling her arms via chains to that waistband, as well as her ankles. And so she is just basically sort of, tied down, can't really move or do anything. And we saw, actually, she's not going all that far. We reviewed a overview map from Google Maps of the location, and she's basically in the same complex. She's not having to get on a bus and then, travel 25 minutes from one part of the city back over to where the trial's happening. It's basically in the same justice complex, which is very convenient. And we talked about this as part of strategy. Where is the defense team setting up? Are they in a hotel? Do they have, a big conference room? What's their situation look like? Are they working out of a hotel conference room, or do they have an office there? Bobby Sternheim is in New York. Is she there at her home, or does the government have home field advantage? And so we're talking about these conditions. Ghislaine Maxwell, right in the middle of a trial, she's got to keep her stamina up. Really nobody in this entire case, her attorneys included, are going to care about the outcome in this as much as her. And so she is going to be, needing to keep her energy up. The family's concerned about it. She's getting moldy eggs in there on top of this. So she's completely shackled. She's a 59-year-old woman. She's not going to be, escaping or running away or anything like that. So we don't need to be treating her like this. It's 2021. What's the problem? And so you can see where, sort of where he's going with this. They've been constantly complaining about Ghislaine Maxwell's conditions, and he's now pleading with Attorney General Merrick Garland, get out there and do something about these inhumane conditions. Now, I actually agree with him, by the way. I don't want anybody to be treated like a subhuman. I don't want anybody getting moldy eggs. I don't want anybody in custody to be abused, to be, assaulted, to be killed, to be molested in any way in custody, because that's not the penalty, okay? Ghislaine Maxwell, whatever you think of her, and I think a lot about her, She is still innocent at this moment. Sorry to tell you that, folks. She is still innocent. She has not been convicted. She has not been proven guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. Nothing has happened. She has not pled guilty, so she is still innocent. And so until she is convicted, the penalties should not, cruel and unusual treatment should not happen at any stage in the case, pre-conviction or post-conviction. But at this moment, we got to hold the line. If you're going to allow the government to treat Ghislaine Maxwell like garbage, guess what happens? Everybody else gets treated like garbage at some point. And before you know it, it's your son, it's your daughter. And I've seen it happen too many times. So the standard is, as a just and sane society, no cruel and unusual punishment, no treatment like this. Now, moldy eggs and all that stuff, right? That's a big no-no. On the other hand, now I can see people saying, well, hold on a minute, Rob. She's in these shackles because we don't want Mossad agents to drop down and parachute out of helicopters and zip line her right out of there. We don't want special forces to open up a hole in the subway ground and sink her in there and shoot her off in a bullet train. That's why. That's why it's such high security. It's high security so that she doesn't break out, latch out of her chain and shackles, grab a gun and shoot herself, or grab a knife and slit her throat, or do something that is very dangerous. Right? It's a security reason. So you've got to balance these interests. On the one hand, treating somebody like a human. On the other hand, making sure that she is not helicoptered out of the detention facility. So we have one more clip from Max.
So we don't understand how it is possible that everybody washes their hands of that problem. The judge says it's not her problem, even though it's happening in her courtroom. The Marshal Service say it's not their problem. They blame the Bureau of Prisons. The Bureau of Prisons says it's not their problem because she's off-site. So the only person who can make a difference and who is responsible for everything is Merrick Garland, the Attorney General, because the Department of Justice is responsible for the Marshal Service, it's responsible for the Bureau of Prisons, and it's responsible for the fair administration of justice. That's what it's about. And so we've simply asked him to organize that the Bureau of Prisons gives her a fruit parcel every day with something nutritious and not a moldy, boiled egg. And we don't see why that even has to be asked for. And the third thing that we've requested is that she be allowed access to counsel when the court has risen. Right? So what happens at the moment is at the end of the day, she is whisked off, back to the pending cell, back to the vehicle, back in shackles, driven to the detention center. And sometimes she waits 90 minutes in shackles before she gets back in to the facility. And what we're asking for is 30 minutes every day when she can speak to counsel when the jury are not present. It's a pretty basic right of being able to consult outside of the actual court sitting. So those are the three things that we've asked for. The buck stops with Merrick Garland. Right? He has to make very simple decisions.
Okay, do you think that Merrick Garland and the Attorney General of the United States, the office of that office, with the Biden administration, is going to intervene on behalf of Ghislaine Maxwell? Probably not. Nice effort there, Max, but unlikely that that's going to happen. But you can still see what he's talking about. He's pointing out something that is accurate, that's actually true. When you try to have a problem in the criminal justice system, everybody points fingers at everybody else. Bureau of Prisons, no, it's not our problem. Talk to the prosecutor. Not our problem. Talk to the sheriff. Not our problem. Talk to the, and around you go. And it is true, there are really bad conditions in some of these places, and it is appropriate for a defendant in the middle of a trial to have access to counsel. So what he's complaining about here is legitimate, right? These are things that I would be complaining about too as a defense attorney if my client were being treated this way. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. Even if it were Ghislaine Maxwell or Jeffrey Epstein, yes, I know. But they deserve a defense. The presumption of innocence is stronger than any, initial gut feelings that anybody might have. That's why we have it. It's a sacred thing in this country, and we're not going to just dump all over it because it happens to be Ghislaine Maxwell. So we've got Max and Isabella out there making their pitch. Now, a lot of the rest of this is very incidental. Yes, she's going to be in shackles. It's just protocol. It's just how it goes. She's not going to get any special privileges on that one. She's also not going to get a 4-course meal. Okay, she's not a billionaire living in, Little St. James anymore. This is now prison. It's not going to be full of luxuries. No more massages there, Ghislaine. And if you have to sit there in 90 minutes in handcuffs, that's just life now. Sorry. Right? That's just how these things go. And so you're weighing, the pros and cons of this, because if you let her out, if you give her a bunch of these, lax conditions, we don't want anything to happen to her, because we know what happened with Epstein when those knuckleheads in this same stinking facility botched it the last time around. All right. So we've got an update on that. We have to clean up a little bit more from yesterday. We remember that we talked about a lot of these exhibits. Remember yesterday we saw Exhibit 230? It was this photograph, and we spent a little bit of time on it. And yesterday, this is all we saw. And our comments back then were, oh, we got some magazines on the floor over here. We've got some photographs over here, but we can't really zoom in and see much of anything. But today, we've got some new photographs. And so we can zoom in and recall, before we got in on this, as this testimony was sort of being presented yesterday, they're zooming in. They're talking about this, here, this is a picture of this area. And then I got closer and I took even more pictures, and they were describing each one of these photographs. So I'm going to click over here in a minute, but you can see what they're about to redact. So this red thing, we can't see what that is. That's going to be redacted. We see another, as we zoom in on this, we're going to see both of these photographs have been redacted. Both of these are cut out. We're also going to notice that this photo right here is out, and this photo here, as well as maybe this photograph, and it looks like some photographs over here. All right, so now that you can see, let's zoom in and take a look at what has been redacted. Boom, there it is. So as we zoom in, you can see a whole lot of redactions, and we don't really know what each one of these are, but it's a lot there. And a lot of this, the reason why these things are being redacted, let's just highlight, here's one here in red. We've got 3 photographs here, small, medium, and big. And then we've got this shelf. We've got a middle shelf and a bottom shelf, another one to the left of the lamp, another one top left up here. And then we've got this image that was redacted. So what are these? Who are these people? Are these people that we don't want to know about? Are these famous people that we can identify, that we're protecting their privacy? Are these overly provocative images of bodies and females or underage people? Are these sensitive in that way, or are these people? Is Clinton back there behind one of those things? Hillary, is she behind one of those photographs? We don't know, but we can walk around and we can see this. We can zoom in just a little bit closer. You see this photograph looks like it was over here, maybe. Yeah, right there. And then we zoom in around that lamp and we can zoom. Well, it's Jeffrey on an airplane, and looks like there may be a young person or somebody sitting in his lap. Uh-oh. And so they black that out. Sounds like, so like the jurors can't see that. It's overly suggestive. This one's blacked out. We also have a little bit of a safe with a camera, it looks like, right here, and another redacted photo top left. So we continue around the rest of the Palm Beach residence. We can see another redacted photo here. So this was on a desk. We see a model of an airplane. We see another photograph, looks like royalty or somebody's visiting with somebody. An old phone. This is Exhibit 285R. And it's the desk of, it looks like, Ghislaine Maxwell. You can see her name right there. It's her notepad. It's her itinerary. Got some keys here in a little key basket. We got a picture of somebody on a horse. Might be her, don't know. But we got a photograph right there in the middle that is highly redacted, so can't see any of that. As we work our way down the hall, similar situation. Another photograph of Epstein sitting next to somebody. Don't know who that is. Right on the corner. Proud to be with somebody. Remembering that relationship. Who is that? Is that a young person or is that a famous person? Don't know. Another redaction right here in the middle of this. Front and center. You can't really get any information from anywhere else because these other photographs are all tilted. They've got glare. You can't see anything. This photograph's innocent. Looks like a beach or an aerial photograph. Here's somebody on a raft in a water. So nothing really to write home about. So those were the exhibits that came out from yesterday's testimony. But you can see this is why it's so frustrating, because we're trying to analyze this and everything's redacted. But we are only getting started because this is where we end with the Palm Beach residents, and we're going to transition over into New York. And that it has a whole additional slew of exhibits that are creepy to say the least. So we'll get there in a minute. But let's start with what happened this morning in court. Ghislaine Maxwell trial day 7. We've got a little bit of a rub that popped up when Jane was out there speaking with other witnesses. Do you remember Jane? Jane was the first accuser that spoke at this trial, and Jane had a conversation with somebody else outside of the purview of the court. New York Post reported about this. We have the photograph from Jane. This is when Jane testified. I think it was day 1. I mean, it was very early on in the case. And so Ben Feuerhard and Tamir Lepin, they reported on this. They said, Jane, the first accuser who testified at trial, spoke to another witness and called one of Maxwell's defense attorney an expletive. And this is a family show. So what's the word? Well, it rhymes with the word front. Jane called Ghislaine's lawyer a word that rhymes with front. Said that learning is a real front, I'll tell you that. We learned about this in court Tuesday morning today. The issue is being raised by defense attorney Laura Menninger, who got called that front, I'm sure. She brought it up before the jury was brought into the courtroom. Prosecutors told the defense team that there was a call between Jane and her brother, Brian, presumably going by a pseudonym as well. And they were made aware about it early on Tuesday. Jane told Brian that when she was testifying, she was shown an exhibit from the Interlochen Arts camp during her testimony. And when they were having that conversation, Jane said that lady's a real front. This is what prosecutor for the government, Allison Moe, told the court. So Laura Menninger, the defense said, all right, Judge, listen, look, call me whatever she wants, that's fine. Part of my concern is that those are the two things that Brian volunteered to us. That's what he told us they talked about. We don't know what actually happened in this conversation, though, says Laura Menninger. Now, why is this a problem? So what if Jane goes and has a conversation with her brother, Brian? Well, it turns out Brian might come in and testify. And why is that a problem? Well, because we have an issue of the sequestration of witnesses. We have the exclusionary principle of the witnesses. We can take a look at the federal rules of evidence, for example. It says at a party's request, the court must order witnesses excluded so that they cannot hear other witnesses' testimony. Or the court may do so on its own. There are certain exceptions to this. Obviously, people who are party to the case, they can't be thrown out of the case. But what this rule says is that if you've got a bunch of witnesses testifying, you can exclude witnesses from listening to the other witnesses. Why might you want to do that? So that if you have two witnesses who are colluding with one another, that one can't just sit in the courtroom, listen to what somebody said, and just mirror their testimony. So for example, in this case, if Brian's going to come out and testify, and he sat there and listened to Jane, well, then he's going to come in and just say exactly what Jane said. It's going to mirror her testimony exactly. So what do? As a defense, you say we want to exclude witnesses. We want to make sure that when Jane's testifying, Brian doesn't hear anything about it. So that we call Brian in and we ask him questions. If his story is a little bit different than Jane's, we've got a problem. We can start to impeach Brian now, or we can impeach Jane, and we can show that these people are liars and they're lacking in credibility because their stories don't line up. And that's why you exclude them. So now when you have a situation where Jane is actually talking with Brian, and Brian's going to come forward as a witness, the defense is saying, foul, can't do that, because we don't know what they actually talked about. Now, Brian's communicating this to us. The prosecutors, thankfully, to their credit, said, look, this happened. We got to alert the court that they're talking about this stuff. But we only know what they actually talked about. Brian was told about Interlochen Arts, was told about the testimony that took place in court. And he was excluded. Foul. Foul, foul, foul. Let's jump into the testimony. This is the issue where we start off with this morning. Inner City Press is reporting, telling us that they are starting the day with arguments about what was said outside of court the previous day. Maxwell's lawyer Menninger says, all right, Judge, I got a request about this problem. My request is to find out what the communication was by him, to him by Jane, before he gets in the stand. He was shown a document that Jane was asked about. So Brian knows what the testimony is. He knows what's coming because Jane talked about it. Judge Nathan says, well, which document? Manager says the interlocking school application. Talked a lot about that one. Prosecutor, I think this is Mo. She stands up and all right, Judge, listen, Jane told him, well, she said that the defense lawyer is a front, is what she said. And manager says, okay, that's fine. But what else did she tell him? What else was she talking about? Judge Nathan says, well, all right, I guess he shouldn't testify until after lunch until we figure this all out. Manager says, I don't care about the swear words or the potty language, that mouth, of that lady. That's fine. But if she's coaching him or if she's communicating what our strategy is, he's no longer a reliable, credible witness. So we got to throw him out. Then they have a sealed sidebar discussion. Public doesn't ever get to see it. So Inner City Press takes a break. We change channels. We go over to Adam Classfield. He's at lawandcrime.com. Maxwell's defense here is now saying we want to exclude that entire testimony. Brian should not be allowed to talk at all. He should just be precluded. He's tainted. Jane ruined this. We don't know what they talked about. He can no longer be reliable. Gone. Judge Nathan says, well, there are some concerns about this. Like, we don't know whether any coaching took place, and I'll consider it. I'm actually going to consider this request to exclude it. Jane should have known better. Government, you should have probably communicated this to her. So Brian, well, I'm going to consider Brian might go. We'll see. Prosecutor comes back, says, look, Brian informed the government about the convo with Jane, right? Brian told us. So Brian is acting above board here. He's not doing anything nefarious. He called us. He said, listen, we had this conversation. He says, he insists, in fact, that we did not go into the details of any of this stuff. Jane told him that he should know the defense attorney is a front. That's it. But the details, the specifics, well, we didn't get into that. And since Brian called us, we can trust him. We don't need to exclude him. He's being honest. Nathan says, okay, the first task now then, fine. All right, listen. Enough of this. The first task is for the government. You have to fully inquire. I want you to go find out what Brian learned from Jane or anyone else. Go dig into that. You're a witness. Go talk to him. What did he learn? Classfield is reporting saying that, the issue here is less that the expletive that was being used. It's the fact that the sequestration order that was already in place is now being violated. There's an order that shields witnesses from each other's testimony so that they can't corroborate their stories, so that you can impeach them. You can say A doesn't match B over here. So we'll see what the judge does about that. We didn't have an opportunity to talk to Brian today, but we'll see if he's able to be called tomorrow. And our next witness in the Ghislaine Maxwell case is FBI agent. This is what the scene looked like. The woman's name is Kimberly Meder, M-E-D-E-R. Looking at a photograph here of Ghislaine Maxwell in court. Apparently looking at a photograph of herself embracing Jeffrey Epstein. We have a little bit of a interesting look on the FBI agent's face. Miss Meder is testifying in court today. Here's how that sounded. She's back on the stand. And remember, yesterday, she was the person who talked about the New York Epstein residence. Remember, we pivoted. We just talked about Florida. Now we're talking about New York. Entirely different set of police officers, different time. This is now in 2019. So we're fast forwarding from the 90s. Here's where we pick up. She said they raided this office back in 2019. FBI, she was testifying yesterday, and so we start right back up with her. She picks up with these photographs. And remember what happened with the Palm Beach raid. In Palm Beach, they were using the police to say, I walked around and I took a bunch of pictures. I recorded a bunch of videos. I was gathering evidence. I did this. This is what I do in all my investigations, blah, blah, blah. Then they got those photographs. Recognize this? Yes. Recognize that? Yes. Recognize that one? Got it. All of those photographs are then admitted as exhibits. We showed several of those previously. So she's picking back up. She took all these photographs. There was somebody there. identifies multiple photographs of Epstein and Maxwell, kind of like what we're looking at here. Yep, that's another one. That's another one. Photos are being identified from a CD that the FBI agent reviewed from an investigation. We see 2 photographs here. We're going to take a closer look at those here in a minute. Yesterday, the testimony ended with a number of CDs being found during that raid. And they found a bunch of just horrendous stuff in his property, right? Look at these, all these CDs. We'll take a look at it. So, a recap. We're now walking through Epstein's New York property. We walk in the front door. This is what it looks like. And we immediately see some redactions. Looks a little bit different than his Palm Beach residence. We saw a lot of pastels. This is, of course, fast forwarded to 2019, so a little bit of a different era. But we see a very clear redacted photo right here, right in the middle of everything. So it's hard to believe that is something of a provocative nature. Probably a famous person or somebody that he's standing there with. Who knows? We have Exhibit 911 is what this is labeled. Interesting photo painting of some sort of a deformed figure that has maybe another face coming out of the top left of his face. Strange. Otherwise, not any decor that really stands out in my mind. We also then move around, and we got some other interesting things happening here. So if you walk around the stairwell, you now walk up this very nice, beautiful, sort of robust staircase. We've got some interesting sculptures here, sort of facial masks or faces that are being balanced on top of these cones. And then we got a little chessboard with a seating area where people can play chess, I suppose. We also then, as we're walking around the property, can take a look at some of these photographs. Here is an example of one of those photographs that we saw sort of might resemble what the FBI agent was testifying to previously. We see Epstein and Maxwell here in this embrace, kissing one another. And the tour around the property continues. We get to another bookshelf, and here is an interesting image. The New York Post caught this one. Says details of the bookshelf in Epstein's home show his face on a massage figurine. His face on a massage figurine. Hard to make that out. This photograph is very pixelated. Don't really know what that is, but there's somebody who looks like they're lying on a, I don't know, massage table or a chiropractor table or some sort of a ceremony of sacrifice. There's some sort of a tablet or written document laying down here on the front of this figurine. Bizarre. Then we start getting into some of the weird stuff. Now, these are just photographs. Your imagination can fill in the gaps, but this is where it starts to get a little bit interesting. So we take a look at the bathroom now. We turn the corner, and here we see some interesting things that are being laid out on the floor. We've got a couple of different boxes, sort of look like different safes with different keys. A lot of these look like they're sort of covered in a felt or something like that. This looks like it's a big safe, and we don't know exactly what's in it. I'm sure they talked a lot about it. If you look in the mirror, you can see that this safe is actually open, or it's a big case. Looks like a safe. It is open, so I can't see if there's a lock on the front of it, but it's a box. It's a container of some variety. We see sort of a dusty countertop. Looks kind of dusty to me. The regular toiletries, nothing stands out about that. But a lot of different items, a lot of different, little weird things that the government just throws out, go through it, and if you're going to stash a bunch of, illegal things, you might put them in stuff that looks like that. Let's just leave it at that. And so as you continue around Jeffrey Epstein's New York mansion, you then turn a corner. This is where you see some bad energy coming out of this room. This is the massage room. It's actually a massage table. We have a number of different exhibits that are labeled in the back. We've got 7 and 8. Little different evidence markers there, identifying some lotions or maybe some alcohol or something of interest that the government thought was appropriate to mark the investigators. You can also see that we have a big redaction on this wall. Don't know what that is. Remember, in this, we talked a lot about certain photographs and artwork being very provocative, being, overtly sexual in nature, and being so provocative that if you saw it, you would just kind of say, all right, that guy, basically everybody's guilty. It's so offensive. It's so provocative that that's it. Don't even need to hear anything else. Got it. Made up my mind. Anybody who was even in that zip code is guilty of whatever. So the government is now, they want to show the jurors that. The defense is saying absolutely not. It has nothing to do with Ghislaine Maxwell. It's too prejudicial. It's not probative enough. And as you bounce around the room, you're going to see those same photographs are all over the place. So we actually, looks like, have some oils and lotions and massages and all sorts of stuff over there. We got some glasses. And we have a photo or something hanging from two chains up here off of the ceiling, and the whole thing is redacted. Nothing there. Blanked out. Another photograph here near the entry or this doorway, redacted. Another redaction, and yet another redaction. So very, very curious as to what those things are. Now, the government is still scoring some points on these things, okay, because these are exhibits that are being marked and submitted. So the jurors are asking the same questions that you and I are asking ourselves. What the heck is going on over here? What are all these photographs showing? This is ridiculous. If this is just a juror sitting there going, if I had a massage room and I wasn't doing anything nefarious in there, and I wasn't an international global trafficker, then I might just have some regular artwork on there. And if I was under investigation for a crime and somebody came in and took a bunch of photographs there, what would they see? Oh, they'd see the R&R Law Group. Oh, they'd see a picture of some mountains over there. Oh, they'd go in there and they'd see a picture of whatever I've got in my office. A lot of different things. Nothing needs to be redacted at all. So in a case where you're talking about a person like Maxwell and a person like Epstein, and you've got hints that some of this stuff was going on, and maybe the prosecution is dabbling a little bit and planting that seed that these people are like, borderline Satanists, the people who are basically, the worst, most evil people in the world. What might you imagine their massage room looks like? Probably like this, with a bunch of stuff on the wall that you can't see because it's so offensive. I'm going to guess that these are not famous people hanging off the walls. We make our way around. We have another photograph of this. You can see a whole different angle. We have a big, big photograph hanging off the wall, completely blanked out. And it's definitely a massage room, isn't it? We can see a bunch of oils on this big casing, towels. We've got a lot of different things happening here, as well as a surround sound system. So, all right, so that's the massage room. Now, that's just what you can imagine in your mind from seeing the room. Now, Epstein presumably recorded a bunch of this stuff. We don't know. But here is another area of the house. This is a closet. It looks like they're taking a picture of the upper portion of sort of the shelf within the closet. And there are just binders, all redacted, labeled, but all redacted. Don't know what's in them, but you've got a lot of files there. And these were also photographs. We've got Selena, AV Shoot 2. We've got Selena 2, AV photos. And just CDs and stashes of this stuff. We can see this is Government Exhibit 926. And the FBI is just rounding all this stuff up, gobbling it up. And we have Kimberly Meder, the FBI agent, who's walking us through this. All of these exhibits then are reviewed, discussed, submitted. Jurors are going to be able to take a look at them. Adam Classfield talks about the cross-examination. Now, Laura Menninger called a front earlier this morning. She's going to be leading it. Cross-examination, Kimberly Meder, the FBI agent, says, we got thousands of images. We don't know if there were tens of thousands, but it was definitely in the thousands, she says. Menninger asks, all right, in one set, there were more than 20,000 of them, weren't there? Is that right? Long pause. Kimberly has to look through the records and doesn't see the number. prompted where to look, and then eventually says, yeah, there were 20,000 in that one batch. Okay, do you know whether the photos were altered? You don't know, right? They could have been altered. You have no idea, do you? Meder says, that's right, that's correct. That's the end of FBI agent Kimberly Meder. Kimberly Meder then is going to be able to connect us to another part of the investigation. Of course, she did the survey. She went around, took photographs. We got to see Epstein's disgusting massage room and the rest of his, artwork. And she found all of those CDs. But if you have, CDs, those can only hold so much data. And so if you're really going to do it right, you need some hard drives if you're going to be, Epstein's level. And so that's what he got. So apparently there were all these hard drives that they found. Data. So if you think the CDs want to make you vomit, he's got hard drives, boxes of hard drives, because he just ran out of space. Burning CDs is a real pain in the butt. So you get some hard drives and you fill those puppies up. And so you need somebody to analyze those, don't you? And so we've got this guy. This is FBI. No, this guy works for the FBI. He is Stephen Flatley. He's an FBI agent. And he did some of the forensic analysis on these hard drives and a lot of the data that came out. And so we're going to hear what he has to say. He's in court. You can see this sketch comes from a sketch artist who is able to draw his facial features. He works for the government, so we can see a little bit about what he looks like. But now he is, in this sketch, talking about what he found on one of the hard drives. Found a photograph, or found an ad, essentially, that was a wanted ad for massage therapists. Says, I put this ad together, or I reviewed this ad that Maxwell put together. We're going to get into the testimony. So here's how it started. Inner city brief again. We wrap up with the prior witness, Stephen Flatley, over with the FBI. He's a digital forensic examiner. Inner city press, doing a great job reporting from their boots on the ground. And this guy, Stephen Flatley, is also a Quantico instructor. So Maureen Comey's back out, daughter of James Comey, and says, all right, Mr. Flatley, what do we have here? He says, this is a hard drive I examined in the Epstein case. And what is the registered organization for this hard drive? He says, comes from GMax. Interesting. GMax. Might be short for Ghislaine Maxwell. I don't know. Could be a coincidence. I don't know. Prosecutor Comey says, how about this email? Okay, well, this email, that's from GMax1 at mindspring.com. Also, could be a coincidence. I don't know. Who knows? She says, I need to know what list John is using. No water in the black Mercedes. No pens. Pool deck is filthy. Ghislaine Maxwell sending an email. It's from GMax1 at mindspring.com. Very upset. The pool deck is disgusting. Email comes from GMax1 from a hard drive called GMax. But could be Ghislaine Maxwell, or that just could be what Jeffrey Epstein calls himself. I don't know. We have more testimony. Flatley tells us about that email. GMax says the massage creams in Epstein's bathroom were a mess. And remember, this is Lady Ghislaine. She's the lady of the house. Juan Alessi was not real keen on her. And so if the massage creams are upset, nobody's happy about that. Prosecutors then talk about this specifically. The massage creams, they're a mess. So they offer Exhibit 418. So those little massage creams that are just massage creams, not really. They're using that testimony to get in an exhibit. Exhibit 418, it's under seal. Don't know what type of massage creams they're really, talking about, but enough to make an exhibit out of it. We have Prosecutor Pomerantz now. We change gears, unless he was mistaken. But we have a government prosecutor says, how about this document? Well, GMax sent it again. This one was dated on September 7, 2002. Massage lotion products. Massage lotion products. Okay. Now Flatley's reading notes about Ghislaine, written by GMax. So it looks like Ghislaine's writing notes about herself, maybe. Including, quote, Jeffrey and Ghislaine really complement each other. They are great partners. Also, they are boyfriend and girlfriend, unlike what some may think. Interesting. On the hard drive obtained from one of Maxwell's properties, there's a note written by somebody called GMax about Ghislaine and Jeffrey. They're great friends. Actually, they're boyfriend and girlfriend. They complement each other very well. They're great partners, and they are, in fact, boyfriend and girlfriend. U.S. prosecutor says, thank you. No further questions. They are great partners. Boom. See that? They are great partners. They really complement each other. They are boyfriend and girlfriend, unlike what some may think. 1, 2, 3. These are yin and yang. These are people that are working in cahoots. These are two peas in a pod. These are partners. These are friends. These are boyfriend and girlfriends. This is not a situation where Ghislaine Maxwell is this damsel in distress, woe is me victim, and Jeffrey Epstein is the monster of the century. And poor Ghislaine is just, along for the ride. She has no idea what's happening. She can't escape his wretchedness. No, not at all. They're partners. They're boyfriend and girlfriend. They really complement each other. And who's writing it? GMax is. She's writing it about herself, is what they're implying. Back in 2002, she's talking about all this stuff, all their activities in the 90s. We complement each other. We're friends. We're boyfriend and girlfriend. We've been doing this whole thing in cahoots the whole time. GMax wrote it herself. Prosecutor Pomerantz says, no further questions. Boom. Mic drop. Turns around and leaves. We get a little bit more color here from Adam Classfield, talking a little bit more about another email. There's one dated May 25th from 2001. GMax, whoever that is, she grouses in the missive. Quote, I need to do what if any list John is using, and he needs to understand that he is truly doing an awful job. So that same email complaining about everything, massage creams were a mess. GMax file 2002. He says this one. GMax entered this note into evidence. Jeffrey and Ghislaine have been together for a couple for the last 11 years. They are, contrary to what many people think, rarely apart. I almost always see them together. The GMax user, the file created by GMax, says, quote, Ghislaine is highly intelligent and great company with a ready smile and an infectious laugh who always puts one's set in context ease. The file created by GMax continues. So what's going on here? We have all these interesting files on Ghislaine's, well, presumably Ghislaine's. We don't know that it's actually hers, but the username is GMax, and her email is gmax1@mindspring.com. So it might be her, or it could be somebody else, who knows. And she's really, really on this thing where she's actually talking about herself almost in the third person. Isn't that weird? It made me think of maybe one of those exercises where you write about yourself in the third person, or you write about yourself in a way that you want. You self-author your future. You write it down. It becomes a reality. I'm going to be a successful actor. Write down your affirmations. I do affirmations. Write down your affirmations all the time. Maybe she's doing that. Ghislaine's highly intelligent and great company with a ready smile and an infectious laugh, right? Identifying what her characteristics are so that she can aspire to be those. Maybe. Or maybe it's somebody else writing it. I don't know. Maybe somebody's actually writing a piece, or maybe she's writing an article for herself, or writing a piece for something. She's writing this. She's going to email this and send this to somebody else. Oh, hey, Ghislaine, can you just write us a little thing about you and Jeffrey? Like, tell us how you guys are. Write a bio for us. Yeah, it could be that. And so she wrote this about herself. It's on the document. Now, Laura Menninger comes out, cross-examines. All right, Stephen Flatley. So you got these hard drives. There's a notes file on that. It's from somebody called GMax. And you copied these files like multiple times. Do you know if anything was changed in the course of copying all these files? You don't know that, do you? Whether anything was changed? He says, I suppose I don't know. And could you find out if, quote, GMax was in the same place as the computer? In other words, were they connected? Or can a hard drive record something from somebody who's not physically present? Of course. And so Classfield then simplifies it for us a little bit, says the defense is establishing the documents were written on a desktop and therefore could not be geolocated. So questions about where this is coming from. Documents aren't even reliable there, Stephen, is what the defense is arguing. Now, interesting little tidbit from Mr. Stephen Flatley, FBI agent. He was saying Ghislaine's name wrong. Here's how he was saying it. He was treating the wrong letter of Ghislaine as silent. He was pronouncing it Ghislaine. Ghislaine, which is a new one. Oh my gosh. I mean, it was Ghislaine last time, but now it's Ghislaine. Now, Adam Classfield, for those of you knuckleheads out there who keep saying it's not Ghislaine, it is Ghislaine. Look at it right here. It's Ghislaine. Per Adam Classfield. Right there. And he's a blue check mark on Twitter, okay? So it's official now. They're at mid-morning recess on the day. And that's all there is to it. That's the end of the discussion about this, okay? We're done. Ghislaine, blue check mark on Twitter. All right. Let's get back to business now. All right, so they have a morning break, mid-morning recess. That was from Classfield, and then they come back out. They have their potty break. They come back out, and it's kind of over right after that. So there's a whimper and a bang. We got Stephen Flatley, according to Inner City Press, just kind of putters out. Members of the jury, they take their break, and so that is it for that segment. Now, we have one final witness of the day. Ghislaine Maxwell trial day 7, we hear from our very second victim. The next victim here is going to take up the rest of the afternoon and probably a big portion of the morning in this trial. And here is what it looked like from within the court. Ghislaine Maxwell listens as Carolyn answers questions from Prosecutor Maureen Comey. This took place December 7th, photograph sketch over from Reuters. And so we can see, as we've been talking about, the sketch artist not allowed to draw people's facial expressions or their facial features, and so we don't get any of that here. Here's another photograph. This is where Maureen Comey is now standing up and actually asking her questions. Once again, the facial features are obscured, but you can see probably another, attractive woman, the type that we have seen previously. Maureen Comey is doing the direct exam. Here is what it sounds like. Carolyn, thanks for coming here today. Let's start easily here. How far did you go in school? 7th grade. My mother was an alcoholic, and I got introduced to Epstein to give him a massage. I said, okay. Wow, 7th grade. How old were you when you had that massage with Epstein? I was 14 years old. Minor. We're going to dive into that, prosecutor says. Let's talk about the first time you met Maxwell. Who greeted you? Well, Maxwell did. And what did she look like? Well, she was an older lady. She had an English accent. I couldn't pronounce her first name correctly, so I called her Maxwell. It's all right, Caroline. Neither can anybody else. We have a massage. $300 is what she's paid. Virginia Giuffre also sued Epstein, also got paid. We can see what's happening here. Each one of these is a little bit of a pod. We're walking through chronologically the timeline of what is happening with Carolyn. Classfield gives us a little bit more color. Carolyn backs up a little bit, describes a relationship with somebody named Sean. When she met Sean, we don't know who he is, this could be a pseudonym, she tells Sean, I'm 17 years old. Turns out she's actually 14. She was at her birthday party. Through Sean, Carolyn meets Virginia. So we have that connection. Then she's introduced to Epstein. 14 is when that happens. Same type of testimony here. She had an accent, shoulder length, black hair, couldn't pronounce her first name. And when this all went down, how did it go? Well, the massage started with Maxwell taking off her clothes. Carolyn left on hers, but Maxwell took hers off. After 45 minutes of massaging his back during this massage, Epstein then turns over. Epstein and Virginia Giuffre start having intercourse. She says that she and Virginia were both paid. Carolyn got $300. So that massage, $300. And she did it hundreds of times, she says. Went to his house more than 100 times, 2 to 3 times a week between the ages of 14 and 18. Hundreds of times. Her voice, as this testimony is unfolding, sounds faint. It's emotional. Prosecutor Comey says, okay, Carolyn, why did you go there? Why did you keep going there? 100 times? Over and over and over again? Why? She has to explain this because the jurors are going to be asking themselves that same question. 100 times? If it's so bad, why did you keep going back? 3 times a week between the ages of 14 and 18 for 4 years. Explaining why. I was young. $300 was a lot of money to me. Okay. Inner City Press says, all right, so Maxwell would call you regularly then. If you went over there hundreds of times, what would Maxwell ask when she called? Well, she just wanted to know if I'd be available when they flew in. They're flying all over the place. Make sure I'm here. They asked me to travel overseas, and I said there was no way that my mother would say that that was okay. You told Maxwell you're 14? Yeah, I told her I was 14. Back to that massage, Maxwell came in, starts feeling her up, says, you got a great body. Maxwell starts the entire incident. Wants you to meet Epstein and his friends. She said, I had a great body, and Carolyn is about to break down and cry on the stand. Talks back again about that massage room. When you were unclothed, who would come into that room? Mr. Epstein would. First, I would massage him. He would ask about my upbringing. Small talk before assault. Would Miss Maxwell ever pay you? Yeah, she handed me 3 $100 bills. Maxwell told her that Jeffrey wanted his address. She got sent lingerie and concert tickets and a book even called Massage for Dummies. So Carolyn is asked by the prosecutor, okay, so this was a horrendous situation for you. Did you bring other friends over to the house? Yeah, I did. I brought Amanda Laszlo over, 1 year older than me. Which is interesting that they named that person. Don't think that's a pseudonym. But that person must have been 15 at the time, brought her over. And so the obvious question, if you're the defense attorney, or the point that you're making is, if you were so abused, why were you bringing other people back over there? Why'd you do it 100 times? Well, because I was 14, and you were 15, and you were 16, and you were 17, and you were 18. And you kept doing it. So that's the point that they're going to make. And you're going to see, how that settles with the jurors. Classfield says, Carolyn said that she saw Maxwell when she entered the kitchen. She'd come in and she'd just let me know that Mr. Epstein would be right back, that he was out on a jog. Carolyn says that she told Maxwell her mother was an alcoholic and that she was molested. Carolyn says, I told Ghislaine, I remember telling her that I'd been raped and molested by my grandfather when I was 4 years old. 4 years old. Prosecutors having this conversation. When you were invited to go to the island, Carolyn says that she told Maxwell that she was, quote, too young. And that, quote, there's no way in hell she'd be allowed to go there. No, she made it. She went there. Question, did Maxwell touch you? Yes. Where? On my chest. Carolyn continues. She brought 3 friends to Epstein's house. And what did you end up doing with all that money? You went over there, you got paid $300, right? And you had to do that multiple times a week, right? And you did it 100 times, didn't you? What did you do with all that money? So Carolyn is saying, as she breaks down into tears on the stand, I was buying drugs. Uh-oh. We've got a drug addict who was abused when she was 4 years old. Carolyn says that she had a son whose father's first name she says in court on March 12th, 2004. And after that date, she returned to Epstein's house because she needed the money. She stopped going because she realized she became too old. How old were you when you became too old? 18 years old. Became legal. Boom, she's too old. Stops going over there. Has a son in the meantime, but that doesn't stop her from going back and having massages. Now she's a single mother. Now she needs money. Got it. Testimony continues. Eventually, it turns out, Carolyn is arrested. Why? Drug use. I handed the officer the drugs. And why did you do that? Because I was an idiot, she laughs. Yeah, typically not a good move. She agrees. She was later arrested. She was in possession of stolen property. Carolyn says she went to therapy following those incidents. She says she later worked for an escort service and even became a stripper. She sometimes had sex with men for money, she said. And Adam Classfield is noting, this sounds pretty bad. This doesn't sound good. He notes, this is still the government's direct examination. They're getting all the bad stuff out. We call this drawing the sting. They know that the defense is going to come out and bring up all these issues, so they got to get it out of the way here on the direct exam. Drug addict, history of sexual abuse, worked as an escort, became a stripper, arrested, criminal history, therapy. This girl's a mess, is what the defense is going to say, and so the prosecution has to get it out of the way. As she's testifying, here is what a sketch artist was showing on the screen. Massage tables showing belonging to Epstein is being shown during the trial of Ghislaine Maxwell. We've already seen a lot of that. That was the sketch of the photograph that basically we showed earlier on in these exhibits. Maxwell is now the subject of this direct exam. We read that one here. There was also two people that Carolyn brought in. Two people named Tatum and Julie. Apparently, Epstein asked Carolyn to bring younger people. I said, I don't really hang out with younger people, but there were some people I could ask. When I brought them, I got paid $600. She got paid $300. Oh, you see, there's a little hierarchy working itself out here. If you bring me somebody, you get more than if you just do the massage yourself. What did they do? Well, they did, all sorts of intercourse every which way. What did you do with the money they paid you? She said, I was buying drugs. She's sobbing her eyes out. The prosecutor says, you got to say it into the microphone. Say it again. Witness is sobbing. Says into the microphone, I was buying drugs. We have a major event. She has a baby. She goes back to Epstein's house. I needed the money, and I realized I was too old. Prosecutor says, didn't you later pawn an Xbox that wasn't yours? Yeah, I did. I went to jail for that one. I did drug treatment. I did therapy. And now I take methadone and Xanax. So I'm actually basically detoxing off of drugs as we speak. I'm on methadone and Xanax because I am withdrawing. So we have look, and I say this as somebody who is very familiar with the 12-step program because I live it. Actually, I have my men's group today in 27 minutes to talk about it, right? Drug treatment and therapy. Congratulations to her for that recovery. But the defense is going to beat this over her head with a mallet, as we're going to see. We're going to jump into this. We have Carolyn now. I'm constantly afraid of my children being trafficked, is what she tells the prosecutor. And are you in touch with the father of your child here, Sam? Well, not since the Xbox pawn shop thing. And have you worked for an escort service and slept with other men for money? Yeah, sometimes I do. And what did Maxwell do to you anyways? Well, she took pictures of me nude, all this stuff with the Epstein stuff. And prosecutor says, and who decided who you would sue? Maxwell's lawyers scream, objection. Don't answer that when I say sustained. Judge Nathan is telling Caroline, hold off on this stuff. So then we get to cross-examination. We bring out Jeff Paliuka. Remember, the G is silent like lasagna. Paliuka comes out and he says, all right, Caroline. So Sean was a friend of Virginia Roberts' boyfriend, Tony, right? And you all smoked weed together and you all drank alcohol, didn't you? Caroline says, well, we didn't drink any alcohol. The weed, maybe, yeah, but not so much the alcohol. And Paliuka says to Carolyn, And it was Virginia Roberts that told you that you could make $300 for these massages? No, it wasn't Virginia. Paliuka says, okay, so it wasn't her. All right, so when Roberts approached you about making $500 then, Maxwell wasn't there, right? It was me and Virginia. And Maxwell was not involved in that conversation though, right? Right. Maxwell's not involved at all. Roberts approached Carolyn, not Maxwell. Maxwell had nothing to do with it. So, all right, so you went over to Epstein's. He paid you all the money. He did all that stuff. But Roberts was the one who recruited her, not Maxwell, is what Paliuka is trying to argue here. We get this photograph of Ghislaine. Now she's reaching over and talking to somebody. Don't know who this is. Looks like it's actually across the bar, which means well, it's kind of a, it might be kind of a no-no on that one. If you're a criminal defendant, you don't really get to reach across the bar and talk to your family. Now, if this is her attorney, if this is Bobby Sternheim, who has that shorter white hair and glasses, maybe that's her attorney, that would be okay. But Bobby really shouldn't be sitting behind the bar. This is across the bar, so that might be her brother. And if Ghislaine is talking to her brother, not supposed to be doing that. And judges will really flip out about that. If you have a defendant who's talking to somebody outside of, when they're supposed to be talking to them, not happy. So we get into cross-examination. Jeff Paliuka, as we talked about, we see a little bit of a mismatch now. Now, ordinarily, the pattern in this trial has been same-gender cross-examinations for victims. So we remembered that when we had our first victim, Jane, that Laura Menninger did the cross-examination. We remembered that yesterday when we had Kate, I think it was Bobby Sternheim, who did the cross-examination on that one. But today we got Jeff Paliuka. He's doing the cross-exam. Obviously, he's male, and Caroline is a female. And this sounds like it is just a brutal cross-examination. It goes on very long. They break for lunch now. And where do we get here? Yeah, so they pick up right here. Paliuka comes out, and we notice that Maxwell's not involved in the conversation, and Maxwell, her lawyer, Paliuka, actually says the last name of the witness. So he probably said something like, okay, so Miss, whatever her last name is, Miss Caroline, whatever, and said that name, and it came out, popped up in court, and nobody said anything. So you see this, the judge is now actually saying, or Inner City Press is telling us, nobody caught it. Comey didn't say anything, court didn't say anything, so we get sort of that violation happens. We go to a break. They have their lunch. They come back, picking back up with this line of questioning. Paliuka says, okay, look at the notes that the FBI took. Carolyn, when you went and you sat down and you reported all this stuff, you talked to the FBI, didn't you? Yeah. And they wrote down some stuff in their notes. Something about a lady with short black hair and a quote, an unknown accent. You said it was an unknown accent. And they didn't cut you off, did they? When they were asking you, like they didn't hurry you along. No, they didn't. So why did you say it was an unknown accent? She says, that was a bad day for me. I wasn't really expecting the FBI to come to my home. Okay, so that's fine, but I understand you're nervous, but you knew what a British accent was, right? You know what a British accent means. Sounds like. But when the FBI asked you about it, you said it was just an unknown accent, didn't you? Carolyn says, the day that you're talking about, and Paliuka says, Judge, I'd ask the court to make her answer that. Okay, she's about to spin off into something. I'm asking the court to answer. Make her answer that. Presumably she does. Paliuka continues and says, all right, Caroline, so for the second visit then to Epstein's house, when you were there, you sat in the kitchen and you spoke then with the chef at that time, didn't you? Carolyn says, I don't remember. I don't know if it was the second visit or after that. Paliuka says, oh, you don't remember. Interesting. Okay, well, let's do this. Go ahead and show the witness what she said in 2007. Show it up on the screen. And he's going to impeach her with this stuff. I don't remember. Do you remember what the theme of the defense is in this case? Money, manipulation, and memory. So every time that the defense can score one of these points, the I don't remember point, perfect. Ding, check that box. Got one. Perfect. Scored it. I don't remember if it was after the second visit or afterwards. Perfect. Okay, well, I remember. I'm going to show you because we have documents from that in 2007. Carolyn says, well, the FBI didn't ask me about Maxwell. Pagliuca says, okay, so are you saying the FBI limited what you could say? Well, they didn't ask me about Maxwell. Okay, but did the FBI limit you from talking about Maxwell? Obviously, no, they didn't. But they didn't ask me about it. Okay, but you voluntarily told the FBI, I mean, when they were interviewing you, you talked freely about Sarah, didn't you? And you talked freely about the incubus tickets from Epstein, didn't you? Yes. Yes, I did. And you talked about this, and you talked about that, didn't you? And when you were talking with the FBI back in 2007, you detailed all the problems you had in the world, but you didn't talk about Maxwell. Well, the FBI didn't ask me about Maxwell. But they didn't tell you that you couldn't talk about her, did you? Did they? And you talked about everything else under the sun except Maxwell. Very interesting. If Maxwell was such a big problem then, and this wasn't about Epstein, why didn't you bring her up? Pagliuca continues. And then after that, you moved from Florida to Georgia, right? She says, yes. They change gears. All right. Well, now I want to talk about these lawsuits that you filed. Carolyn says, well, what does that have to do with me moving to Georgia? Witness is getting a little bit testy over here. Caroline, you are not the attorney here. You don't get to ask the questions. And that's what Pagliuca is going to do. Asks her again and again and again about the FBI 302s. As soon as she snaps, he cracked her. As soon as she snaps, he's just going to have fun with it. And the judge declares an afternoon break. He asks her again and again about FBI 302s in the lawsuit paragraphs. There's multiple objections, it sounds like. They have a break outside the presence of the jury, and they argue into it. Judge sends the jury out for a recess. Pagliuca says, all right, listen, Judge, I'm going to impeach this witness by omission. She filed a civil complaint. She filed a lawsuit here, pointing to paragraphs of Carolyn's civil complaint about Sarah Kellen. Now he's saying that the government is trying to play down Kellen's role and play up Maxwell's. We had all of those other co-conspirators. We talked about this in the mind map, which is now available at watchingthewatchers.locals.com for a link if you want to take a look at it. Sarah Kellen, actually, we can take a quick look at that. I think we've got some time on it. Let's take a look at the mind map real quickly. And we can take a look at the Epstein non-prosecution agreement. So you see here, this is Sarah Kellen. She was specifically detailed in this non-prosecution agreement. The language is right here, Sarah Kellen. And so as part of the 2007 deal, she's specifically named. Epstein's a problem, but he's now going to be covered basically by this plea agreement. It's also going to cover all of these other people who were written in here. Ghislaine Maxwell is saying that she should also be covered under there as a named co-conspirator, but the court found that she wasn't. And so now as we have Caroline testifying, the prosecution is saying, or the defense is saying, they're trying to minimize Sarah Kellen's role and re-emphasize Maxwell. And so it continues. The civil complaint is doing the opposite. The civil complaint is saying that Kellen was the person who did all of it, not Maxwell. So Pagliuca wants to dig into that. We have a conclusion of the afternoon recess. Pagliuca then turns to Carolyn's history of alcohol and drug abuse. And then this is when it just starts to, I think, go poorly for Carolyn. Pagliuca refers to the previous testimony. She said this in her prior litigation, in a prior lawsuit. Says, okay, Carolyn, when you filed this other lawsuit, there's a line in there. It says, question, did you ever have intercourse with Epstein? Answer, no. Carolyn says no in a prior lawsuit. Pagliuca pulls up this lawsuit. I'm referring to your testimony in this prior litigation. Did you ever have intercourse with Epstein? Your answer in this lawsuit was no. And Carolyn freaks out, jumps in, interjects. about the exchange. Jumps right into that. I replied no because I was not a willing participant. He slept with me and I stopped it. Carolyn is saying to everybody that she never slept with him. He slept with her. In her prior litigation, talking about the specific, did you ever have physical intercourse with Epstein? She said no, which is obviously not accurate. She's clarified. It's one or the other, isn't it? Either she had intercourse with him or she didn't. In prior litigation, she said no, that they never had intercourse. In this trial, she's saying that yes, they did. She's explaining her prior statement as this. And do you buy that? I replied no because I was not a willing participant. He slept with me and I stopped it. We got two different versions of a story here. Prior litigation, didn't have intercourse. Current case, did have intercourse. We also have a defense saying drug addict, somebody's in therapy, criminal record, basically a prostitute, escort, somebody with a very, very troubled past, somebody who was sexually abused at age of 4. All sorts of problems. And in prior litigation, says that she never even slept with Epstein. Not what we just heard, is it, at all? Paliuka then says, so when you were going through all that treatment, when you were in and out of rehab, when you were working on yourself, is it true that you never once mentioned Maxwell in therapy? Never once. Correct, she says. Manipulation. Remember that point from the defense? These women are now being manipulated. They are being manipulated. They were abused by Epstein. They are being manipulated to go after Ghislaine. Maxwell is almost completely absent from this woman's testimony, according to Paliuka. Doesn't come up in therapy. Never mentioned previously. Even in the original litigation that she filed previously, talking about Sarah Kellen being more at fault than Maxwell. Civil complaint says the exact opposite of that. It carries on. Inner City Press was reporting this, says that after Paliuka asked Carolyn again and again about the FBI 302s and the lawsuit paragraphs, we take a break. The entire complaint, it's argued by Paliuka, is inconsistent. Maureen Comey is arguing about the lawsuit, trying to keep it out, saying that lawsuit was against 2 defendants. There's no reason they should be let in. Judge Nathan lets it in. Jury comes back in. Paliuka says, you recall abusing drugs from the age of 13? Since you were a 13-year-old, you've been basically a drug addict, right? Well, if you call pot drugs, she says, and I guess. And you went to Georgia to detox, didn't you? Well, no, I went to Georgia to escape traumatic events in my life. Okay, and let's talk about claims of sleeping with Epstein. It's true that you used cocaine when you were at his house, isn't it? She said no. What is any of this? And she says, she jumps in now. She's starting to crack. She snaps. What does any of this have to do with what I'm here for today? Carolyn says, Ghislaine Maxwell fondled me, and she broke my soul. Paliuka says, oh my, Judge, move to strike that right now. Judge Nathan says, Carolyn, you have to follow my rules. You can't talk out of turn like that. Jury, please disregard. Paliuka says, all right, okay, she's back in line now. Paliuka says, okay, and you received these funds from the Epstein Compensation Fund. Carolyn jumps in. No amount of money will ever heal. Paliuka, Judge, I move to strike. Judge Nathan, again, all right, jury will disregard. I am now instructing the witness to comply with the rules. Carolyn, you have to comply with these rules. Stop talking out of turn. Paliuka finishes up now because she's, basically cracked in front of the jury. Paliuka says, you claim you saw a photograph of Miss Maxwell pregnant, right? Yeah, she was naked and pregnant. That was on multiple, no further questions from Paliuka. You saw a photograph of Maxwell pregnant, right? Yep, sure did. Multiple, no further questions. Maureen Comey comes back out. We've got 3 minutes. Comey says, did you write your legal complaint? Carolyn says, no, I didn't write that document. Yeah, I filed the lawsuit, but I didn't write it. My lawyer read it. And then we do the math. What year was it when you were 13? They do the math. They get it. And you are here to get are you here to get money? Carolyn says no, what she did was wrong. She took young girls. Paliuka jumps in. Objection. No further questions from Paliuka or from Comey. We get one quick follow-up from Paliuka. The $446,000 you got in 2009, that was gone, though, in 2012, wasn't it? I don't know, sir, Carolyn says. I have children I take care of. And you can't recall how you spent almost $500,000? You lost all of it? Okay, no further questions. Thank you. That's Jeff Paliuka then. Closes that out. And that is it for our testimony today in day 7. We have one final matter of business from Judge Nathan. Excuses the jurors, says I'll see you tomorrow. But now the government stands up and says, we're going to be resting this week, folks. What? The prosecution is going to be done this week? It's Tuesday. This was our second victim today. It was said that this would be a 5 to 6 week trial. This is a big change. Now Judge Nathan floats a charging conference on Saturday the 18th. Might actually have an entirely different court date on a Saturday. Judge Nathan says, I've inquired and we could get Maxwell here on a Saturday. We could open the overflow room, so we'll work on that. Meanwhile, no listen in, no call in line, none of that, as the trial continues to unfold. And so we have a short few minutes to take some questions, if there are any, from our friends over at watchingthewatchers.locals.com. And I saw 1 or 2 super chats come in, so we'll be sure we get to those as well. We have cbdx.com is here, says, it's been a wild ride so far. Thanks for the great coverage. Reminder, use Grueler at checkout to get 20% off their legal THC products. I'm going to only indulge that for a little bit longer, but it's very clever. Janet Hunt says, treat her the same as all the other criminals. I agree with that. I think that they should all be treated the same. All be treated the same. Glenn as well. And we have Marzipana says, no question, but a nice donation and super chat. We have former LEO says, what would be your position if the 5 steps of grooming were applied to Maxwell? I think a case could be made that she was Epstein's first victim. It's a very good concept there, former LEO. And I think that the defense is going to be trying to make that pitch. In other words, she's a victim of Epstein. Has she been examined by a sexual assault therapist or anything like that? I don't know. Probably. She's got a whole team of people working on her. Sergeant Bob says, I do agree with you, Robert. However, she is no better than the protesters still in custody. If Garland does in fact get involved, the January protesters are also entitled to redress. Maxwell's money should not make a difference. P.S. Sometimes hard-boiled eggs yolk have a green cast. Moldy may not be accurate. That is true, Sergeant Bob. Yeah, they have sort of a little greenish, blue hint to them. Vientikis says, just to add a little anecdote to what you said about innocent until guilty. When I used to tutor kids, I would tell them to be careful on how you treat people because you never know who that person could turn out to be later on. This falls along the same lines. It does, right? Because you never know, it could be your son who's facing a ridiculous assault charge. And it's a problem. Let's see. 3 Girlies is here. Says, I don't want anybody to be dealing with the stuff that happens in prison. I don't believe there should be any food that's moldy or spoiled. There should be an inspection if that's the case. Her lawyers have been complaining about this all along. How much of this is because she's used to a different standard of living, more than complaints that they're giving that every other inmate has? Should she get acquitted, couldn't she sue for the inhumane treatment that she has received? Yeah, she could sue right now, really. If she wanted to. From the view of the corrections officer, shackles are protocol in every prison. Doesn't matter what age she is, it's for the safety of the officers and the people around her. So long as it's not medically necessary for her to not have the shackles, she's going to have the shackles. 90 minutes in shackles happens when there are other things going on in the facility that causes there to be a delay. These officers are not trying to keep her in shackles. Their whole world is not revolving around her. It revolves around the whole of the facility. Food is disgusting in prison, regardless of how fresh it is. Prison food is downright inhumane from my point of view. I could not stand seeing the amount of food they were giving, as well as the quality of the food. This food is given to every inmate. Never going to be the quality that she was used to before prison. That's from 3 Girlies. Very, very, I think, reasonable comment there. Thank you for those details and I think all of it is very accurate. Vientika says, did Jane call the lawyer a Does the lawyer like to try and get around things? There's a lot of things that rhyme with that. Outnumbered Mom says, are the photos blacked out for the jury too? If so, that's going to look like 1,000 times worse for Ghislaine. Imagination is always going to be bigger than reality. Yeah, so yes, I believe that those redactions that we saw are going to be what the jurors see. But it's hard to tell because we're sort of viewing from afar. Speech is here. Says, couldn't the brother just have read the Twitter post coverage to find out what his sister was questioned about? Yeah, could have. Yeah, he could have. Doesn't seem that there is really any way to prevent one witness to know what another witness testified to if it is being reported publicly. Yeah, that's true, right? That is true, but it's sort of the same charge that you give to the defense or to the jurors, right? Yeah, you can go find out about this stuff, but you're sort of using your honor system, your honor code, that you're not going to do that. And you're swearing, under penalty of perjury that, yep, I'm going to be accommodating of all of that. NY Renal MD says, why are all the photos redacted? Who advocated for that? Probably the defense. Typically, the average person doesn't get that level of privacy. Relatives of those arrested don't have the right to be redacted out of photos. Wouldn't one of the attorneys have to make a motion? Yeah, so the defense did. They didn't want any of that stuff to be shown because they say it's overly prejudicial and it's not probative enough. It doesn't go to the nature of the allegations against Ghislaine Maxwell. It's just prejudicial. It's too harmful without really getting to the root of the matter. We also have, given what the jury has been allowed to see and hear, and now sees a bunch of art and photos getting redacted, only going to cause them to speculate that those must be really offensive. Sometimes what people can imagine is often worse than reality. T. Miller is here, says, did I miss something? The FBI agent reviewed a mountain of CDs and hard drives, and the summation was that Epstein and Maxwell were dating? Huh? So that's what we heard there, T. Miller. But you're right. I think there was a big portion of today's testimony that was redacted and that we didn't get to see much of. And so there's other stuff happening there. I'm sure of it, but that's what we've got. Yeah, they're in a relationship. Happy couple. They're inseparable. Okay. And so that was from speech. We have just a couple minutes left. If I don't get to these, we'll come back tomorrow and get those out. Former LEO says, those redacted pictures in the massage room could have been pictures of Hillary Clinton nude on the massage table, and nobody should be forced to see that. I agree with you. Monster One says, off topic, what are your thoughts on Metroid Dread? Just picked it up a few days ago. Some of the bosses are pretty frustrating. I agree with you on that, Monster One. There was, there were several. I almost threw my Switch out the window. I don't know, 4 times, 5 times maybe. And I stopped playing it because the last boss is just driving me nuts. I'm going to have to take, the whole thing to accomplish that one. Kincaid says, all right, evening, Rob. I think you're right about the prosecution going for the evil creep factor. It just seems like they're also trying to lasso in as much atop a dead horse. How much of the prosecution tactics are about minimalization and upper echelon corners? Also, did Trump forecast some things once thought crazy? The GMax notes could be explained as her silent screams to get out, blah, blah. That's from Kincaid. Yeah, there's a lot there, Kincaid. I appreciate you chiming in with that. Jeremy says, Rob, excellent analysis of the Ghislaine map. Viva gave you a plug earlier, including your fancy-pantsy social network map. By the way, as an expert watching the Watcher Program Observer, an amateur social scientist, I don't like that Arizona has its own time zone. Well, I don't like that you guys change yours all the time. I mean, get with the program. What century are we living in here? I don't get to participate in your live show as much because I get busy at work. I do get caught up afterwards. Keep the expert analysis coming. Many of us look forward to hearing your take on the trial. Well, I appreciate being here and spending time with you likewise, Jeremy, so I'm glad that you show up. And, I know that the time zones change. I know it's frustrating, but it's not permanent because we'll change back. Speech Unleashed says, do you know if the baby Caroline had could be Epstein's, presuming that she was sleeping with him during that time frame? So she said that it wasn't. We have the name of a father somewhere. And we had Janet Hutt says, why would they rest? So it's a good question. They're feeling very good about their case. They're feeling like they got a couple more victims to call. They don't need much else. They provided for 6 weeks, but they don't need it. They got through it quickly. They think they're checking all their boxes. That's all they need. And they've been moving along quickly. I don't think they want to bore the jurors to death. They're not doing the Thomas Binger approach. which is the right move. They're going to, go in fast, present a lot of the evidence, not waste anybody's time, and see what the jurors have to say about it. All right, my friends, and that is it for me for the day. I want to thank those of you who participated in the show from our community over at watchingthewatchers.locals.com. We've got our monthly meetup taking place this Saturday, December 11th, 7 to 8 p.m. If you're a member over at watchingthewatchers.locals.com, you'll see a registration form, and I'm going to invite you to come and join in on that. It's going to be the ugly sweater edition, so make sure that you bring one of those and you're locked and loaded and ready to go. Case sent in a final super chat. It says, Epstein and Ghislaine seem to have been running a sparrow training school. I don't know what that means, and I'm afraid to ask. So that was from Kay, and that, my friends, is it for us for the day. We're going to be back here to do it all again tomorrow, and I need you to be here so that together with your help, we can shine that big, beautiful spotlight of accountability and transparency down upon our system with the hope of finding justice. Have a great night, my friends. I will see you all tomorrow. Bye-bye.